The League's outreach. The Mages League continued its work throughout the years, eventually establishing a branch in each major kingdom, only paralleled by an increasing distaste for magic in the East. There was nothing hard set that prohibited magic in the East, just a general distaste and attitude towards it. This is most likely to have occurred due to those bandits as well as those who remained after the Great Migration would have only been those who did not wish to buy or sell an imbued artifacts, leaving all who remain either uninterested in magic or incapable of performing it. 5 years after their reappearance, the Mages League discovered that anyone could theoretically have the capacity to perform magic if they practiced long enough. It is currently 10 years past their reappearance. No longer would Nur be known as Magner nor Nurnur, just Nur. It is assumed that a large portion of the Shire's kingdom's residents were naturally magically inclined, and that non-magically inclined Nur lived in the east due to the historical restrictions imposed in other lands and not in the Shire Kingdom. At this point in history, the world is in a troubled place. Once again, it seems that a great conflict might be on the precipice of emerging. The Mages League determines that the best way to ease tensions is to spread the news that anyone could learn magic. So the Mages League established a network of portals that connected each branch of the League to the central outpost. The orders were clear. Determine those best suited to study within the League and accept them in. All new initiates were to study from the 5 recognized schools established many years ago. Seeing as many accepted would have little to no intuitive magic skills, it was expected that each initiate only must master one of the schools. However, once accepted may remain as long as they wish to become a full member and join one of the League's sects. Months after the League began accepting initiates, the Eastern Kingdoms began preparing for war. Those who were turned down by the League or those who opposed magic helped keep their war preparations a secret for as long as possible. Meanwhile, in the Shire Kingdom, many citizens of the Shire Kingdom requested initiation into the League, but since many had already understood basic concepts of magic or imbuement, the bar of entry was much higher in those parts. Those who believed themselves potentially powerful mages but were overlooked by the League grew in hatred. Slowly, the Shire's primary source of tax revenue started to dwindle, as the king wondered what could be the cause of this, so he assembled the greatest merchants of the kingdom to find answers. Each merchant, when asked, gave somewhat of the same response. Imbued artifacts were showing up less and less. The king assembled all his thoughts and his best advisors. He had then list all the reasons why Nur would stop wanting to trade for imbued artifacts. The king made his decision with the word of his advisors to shut down recruitment into the Mages League within the king's walls, for he feared that the League was responsible for siphoning all those who had been imbuing artifacts for trade. The king would have never suspected that the other kingdoms of the land had been buying up all the imbued artifacts, due to their fear of another war, but in fact that is the very thing that had been happening. In an attempt to prepare for war against magic, the Eastern Kingdoms began hoarding imbued artifacts to determine their properties and use them or destroy them if they could serve no tactical advantage. Regardless of what the Eastern Kingdoms believed about magic, they knew that if there was to be a war, they must prepare the best they could. This fractured the Eastern Kingdoms into 2 factions, those who believed that they should use magic to stop others from possessing it, and those who believed that magic should not be used by anyone, even themselves. While similar in ideology, the 2 groups caused a rift in the Eastern Kingdoms, some who chose to move to the southmost border, and those who would remain. The ones who chose to leave became known as the Nanner, and established a fairly decent, successful port city. However, they strictly prohibited the trade of magic-related items. Over time, the Nanner port city would be the homes of thousands who wanted nothing to do with the strike that followed magic. Those of which remained in the Eastern Kingdoms would be known as the Xanner, and would spend years attempting to control magic for themselves. Many cities would rise in the name of the Xanner Empire, and all would be governed by the use of imbued artifacts to enforce laws. For the most part, the Shire Kingdom remained the same, eventually allowing the Mages League to reopen a branch within the walls, after of course learning that the Eastern Kingdoms were responsible for the low stock. The Xanner would attack both the Shire Kingdom and the Nanner City. Both attacks would be unsuccessful. The Shire Kingdom had a great many powerful mages that were willing to be enlisted in the army 2 days after the first attack, thus bolstering their forces. The Shire warned the Mages League of a possible attack on the Nanner City, and the Mages League agreed to match any size of army the Shire Kingdom sent to help defend the city. 500 soldiers were sent to defend the northern front, and 500 mages from the League would provide aid to the soldiers and the defenders of the city through magic. In the end, Xanner could not win in a head-to-head fight, no matter how strong their artifacts could be, so a plan was hatched to craft a wicked spell. The Xanner had been doing their own research into magic and spells ever since the split of the Eastern Kingdoms, and had made the discovery that a spell both imbued and cast could have its power enhanced significantly if certain conditions are made on it. The spell that the Xander warriors cast required 60 Nur within the main city of the Shires to be cast in unison. The spell would infect the air and cause a single Nur to go mad. The single Nur that the Xander targeted was the king. A late-night patrol within the Shire Kingdom caught wind of the Xander within the city, and the alarms rang late into the night. All 60 Xander had been killed before the sun rose, but it was too late. The spell had already been set in motion. Within days, the king would show signs of paranoia and delusions. Then a thick fog rolled in. With no one to lead the people of the Shires and little incentive to remain, most of the residents disbanded and created smaller civilizations north of the Shires. Hearing word of the success of the spell, the leader of the Xander sent one last patrol to burn the Shire Kingdom to the ground. While the patrol did face a defense at the main gates, the remaining King's Guards and a few members from the Mages League were the last to defend the gates. But from being outnumbered and wounded, the Mages League members opened portals so that the defending forces might escape. The Xander soldiers persisted through the burning everything asunder, killing hundreds of innocents that were unable to or had yet to leave the kingdom. The Shire Kingdom was no more. Now all that remained was Cinder Shire. Over time, some would come through the fallen kingdom to sift through the rubble and ash, many in hopes of finding the dungeon the king built so long ago. Many to this day believe that the king of the Shires used that dungeon to hoard imbued artifacts that he felt were too powerful in the hands of others, but those are just stories. After seeing the devastation that came from the Xander mages, the king of the Xander decided that it was time to cut ties with magic altogether. He ordered the execution of all Xander mages and the destruction of all imbued artifacts in their possession. The Xander had one goal now and forever: destroy all magic from this world, which was in direct opposition with the Mages League, who sought to expand the reach of magic. The two factions would keep the magic of the world in check, with the Xander destroying magic-related items as quickly as the Mages League could produce them. Eventually, the Mages League would change the criteria of entry to require an individual be selected by a current member. Both factions would become smaller and smaller over time, eventually being outnumbered by those of the Nanner, making magic an uncommon yet accepted sight as the Nanner simply wished to be left alone when it came to the topic of magic.